The 10th Legion's Astartes, the Iron Hands. Renowned for their pride, their cold-hearted ferocity, and their utter remorselessness in battle. The Iron Hands were the hammer that had shattered countless foes in the Emperor's quest to liberate mankind from the darkness of old night. Their primarch was Horus Heresy, a bellicose and uncompromising warlord and peerless weaponsmith, from whom the 10th Legion took its name, and whose every command was to them inviolate law. Caught up in the machinations of the War Master's treachery, the Legion was undone by hubris and the blade of the traitor both, and paid a heavy price in the brutal slaying of its primarch and the near crippling of its strength. Though left a shattered Legion, the cold fury of the Iron Hands' bitter vengeance would afterwards be writ across the very stars. The martial history of the 10th Legion is relatively well documented. It primarily drew recruits from the warlike cultures of old Albia, renowned for their brutality, which lent the nascent 10th a fierce warrior pride. In the first years of the Great Crusade, the Legion earned great renown for its bellicose strategies, pioneering a combined arms method of war in conjunction with the Exertus Imperialis, known as the Hammer and the Storm. This was developed and put to great use against the Xenos orcs on the planet known as Rust, but was used by the 10th Legion many times. First, the Imperialis Auxilia forces would make planetfall en masse via their brute power of their landing ships, digging into their beachhead. This was the Storm. When the enemy came to meet them in numbers almost beyond count, came the Hammer, the armored spearhead of the 10th Legion's tanks, with dreadnoughts and warriors on foot following close behind to break the enemy's back. This hammer blow earned many grand victories for the 10th Legion during the Great Crusade. The Legion gained much renown for its cooperation with the Imperial Army, its effective leadership, and its strategic prowess. The 10th went on to earn a reputation for remorseless, highly coordinated warfare, and a particular fame for successfully prosecuting set-piece battles incorporating close armored vehicle support was attributed to the Legion. As is perhaps unsurprising in so calculating and methodical a master as Horus Heresy, the Iron Hands Legion was a highly structured military force, with numerous tactical and strategic divisions of power and organization within its ranks. The Iron Hands Legion was deliberately composed of a series of interlocking components, each with its own specialization, duties, and chain of command, beholden only to itself and its immediate superiors. Each of these components, be they Legionary Squad, Armored Vehicle Squadron, or support elements, came together first as companies. But beyond this, each company was a part of a larger grouping with its own independent command, support, and logistical network, armory, and fleet, created for a particular campaign or battle. These formations were referred to as orders and were superficially equivalent to a specialized battalion in general Legion's Astartes terms, but far more concrete in composition and independent in operation. Multiple orders were then often formed into a larger single clan grouping, and sometimes units from different clans fought together within them, often as rivals for glory and achievement. Clans were notionally the Iron Hand's equivalent of the chapters of other legions, but were in practice of distinct character, being patterned to a larger extent on the Medusan feudal system, and were linked to the planet's nomadic barbarian populations as recruiting bases. These Iron Hand clans were in fact pocket legions, fully self-sufficient and self-supplied, and each had a single chieftain, Iron Lord, or Iron Father to rule them by Primarch-given right. Each clan had a very real and distinct identity, and each vied against each other for glory, attainment, and for resources, as well as for the favor of their Primarch. Where a warrior of the clans failed their legion or their Primarch, they were offered a forlorn hope to be separated from their clan and serve the legion at the fiercest point of battle as an immortal, to die with steadfast courage and cold fury. The level of integration and strength the Iron Hand's Legion system manifested was extraordinary, if somewhat inflexible. Whether deployed as a single company or a full legion in scale, it was a crushing leviathan when in action, against which no foe could stand, but also, at times, brutally intractable and slow to change course through its single-minded pursuit of its starting objectives. The Legion maintained a particularly extensive and sophisticated arsenal of war engines, especially tanks, armored vehicles, and dreadnought walkers, the equal of any legion save perhaps for Perturabo's fourth. Thanks to the long-standing ties to elements of the Mechanicum and the technological aptitude displayed by many of its number, the Legion maintained access to numerous cybernetic implant systems seldom seen outside the ranks of the machine cult. It is also worthy of note that the Iron Hand's Legion and its master Ferrus Manus was at the forefront of the introduction of a number of weapon systems and armor patterns over the course of the Great Crusade. The fruits of some, such as their contribution of the prototype Indominus pattern to the tactical dreadnought armor project used by their Gorgon Terminator elite, and the powerful Stormbreaker pattern Thunderhammer, would later be widely disseminated to the rest of the legions. Many patterns and creations they shared with their trusted allies amongst the Mechanicum, while the secrets of certain other weapons and metallurgic and cybermantic crafts, particularly those dangers of old night were covered during the Great Crusade. They kept in Ferrus Manus' secret vaults of Mimir. At the very onset of the Horus Heresy, Ferrus Manus and his legion were drawn into the trap set by Horus and his traitor legions, and their once bright legacy was almost entirely extinguished. Ferrus was slain, and this wrought a terrible legacy on the legion's psyche, for they believed unquestioningly in his inviolable power. A bitter psychosis swept through the ranks of the Iron Hands, for if the Primarch's flesh had failed him, surely that of his sons would fail them in turn. Others would look to the technologies sealed away by Ferrus Manus, unleashing terrible cybernetic nanite plagues and revivifying their own dead in a process known as turning the keys of hell. A fractured, shattered legion would remain of the Iron Tenth, one whose rigidity would fail and give way to the malleability and unceasing quest for vengeance. The Primarch Ferrus Manus, known as the Gorgon, and blessed with arms of living metal, which gave his legion its name, was among the first of the Emperor's lost sons to be discovered. He was found on Medusa, the cold, barren realm, driven for countless generations to incessant clan warfare, through privation and hardship. Medusa maintained a great deal of mechanical and technological lore, though it was little understood by its superstitious denizens. Ferrus Manus displayed an uncompromising intelligence and aptitude towards mastery of technology and the forging of Medusa's sciences, and rose quickly to prominence to unite the clans. Ferrus Manus' transition from planetary warlord to general of the Great Crusade was a swift one, aided by his evident hunger for the task of galactic conquest set before him, and his diligent application to this greater calling. When reunited with his legion, he took command of it body and soul, renaming it and remaking it in his image. The Primarch assessed the 10th with a precision and intent with which an artisan might deconstruct a mechanical chronograph, reconfigure its components, and reassemble it in a fashion more to his liking. Ferrus Manus and his legion cared little for the minutiae and bureaucracy of the Great Crusade. They saw their task as a clear one: to expand the borders of the Imperium and to destroy its enemies, nothing more. They disdained the politics of the imperial court and the pursuit of glory as petty trifles, and left the task of rebuilding what they had shattered to those better suited to the task. When once asked of his legion's role in the Great Crusade, Ferrus Manus is held to have simply stated, "Make war and move on, and again, until nothing breathes which stands against us." The 12th Legions Astartes, the World Eaters, The 12th Legion were monsters long before Horus's rebellion. Of all the Space Marine legions of the Great Crusade, none were so savage and dreaded. They were the hounds of war that brought death as beasts, butchers, and madmen. The merest whisper of their coming could quell rebellions and send armies to flight in terror. Tales of their predations and massacres were numberless, and their reputation was well earned. In their early days, they were an unrelentingly macabre but disciplined fighting force, which knew the virtues of tactics and weapons and could adapt to meet any foe. These warhounds retained martial nobility beneath a film of gore. Under their Primarch, and later during the Age of Darkness, the World Eaters were stripped of what little remained of their restraint and humanity, becoming the basest weapons of war without nuance or wisdom. Their coming meant only brutal extermination by chain axe and bolt shell, and worlds drowned one by one in the blood of their inhabitants. There was no particular bias as to the tribe or city-state from which the initial influx of recruits for the 12th Legion was drawn, as there was in the case of several of the other legions, and its gene seed was stable and unremarkable. The 12th's first recorded engagement was a spearhead of shock troops during the Saafric Liberation, mounting direct annihilation assaults on enemy forces, both in open battle and fortified positions. After its initial battles and proving its mettle, the nascent legion was largely held in reserve by the Emperor during the latter unification wars and through the reconquest of the Sol system. It is thought this was because the Emperor desired his superlative shock force intact in the event of a sudden reversal of the fortunes of war, or as a savage weapon to be unleashed in case of disloyalty among the Emperor's own. During this time, the 12th was kept in a state of constant readiness, training relentlessly and steadily growing in numbers, always straining at their leash to be loosed. On those occasions during the Great Crusade when the Legion was sent to war, it performed with almost gleeful savagery, tearing apart whatever enemy it was given to, without mercy or falter, regardless of its own losses and heedless of risk. Such was their tenacity and courage as a fighting force that the Emperor dubbed the 12th Legion as his warhounds, a title that others may have seen as a slight, but which the Legion was honored to hold. Culture within the World Eaters was violent and bloodthirsty, which was echoed in the shifting skein of the Legion's own rites and ceremonies. The martial traditions of Old Terra and the warhounds, who had prided themselves in their fury and courage above all else, were replaced by Angron's own red code of butchery and savage competition. Each of the Legion's ships maintained a gladiatorial pit, where warriors would fight to prove their strength and supremacy, sometimes to the death. Hand-to-hand combat was always the Legion's preferred form of warfare, even before it took the Emperor-given name of the Warhounds for itself. This did not mean that the Legion lacked ability and competency in ranged engagements or armored warfare and supporting artillery attacks. Indeed, no lesser luminary of mechanized warfare than the Primarch Ferrus Manus himself praised the Warhounds' armored assault at Aldebaran Septis as the epitome of ironclad rage given form. But for the Warhounds, such things were a tactical means to an end. The end was successfully delivering the killing force of the Legion, Space Marines. The 12th Legion showed a considerable bias toward direct assault and operations within the close and deadly confines of the kinds of battlefields designated as Zone Mortalis in strategic doctrine. This would continue under Aengron's transition of command, and the Legion's traditional organizational structures were kept largely intact, but often further streamlined, with its echelons, as its chapter-level structures were commonly named, being biased in composition towards line infantry formations. These were, by their panoply in tactics, a hybrid of tactical and close assault troops for the main part, supported by dedicated heavy assault units such as Terminators and specialized units such as Land Speeder squadrons. This organization lent itself well to a highly aggressive strategic posture and belligerent strategy, which, while extremely costly in terms of casualties, was also highly effective. This sudden, overwhelming blow was designed to keep the enemy pinned in place, fighting this vanguard, while a second wave of armor and heavier units followed in its wake and smashed into areas of high resistance revealed by the first wave. By these tactics, the World Eater's onslaught overcame any resistance through sheer fury, hurling themselves again and again at the foe until their enemy broke and was cut down, fleeing in terror. In order to cope with the rigors of their training and ceaseless campaigning, a dark practice evolved within the ranks of the World Eaters. The use of psychosurgical implants known as the Butcher's Nails. This device enhanced aggression and pain tolerance far beyond that which even the gene-engineered flesh of a Space Marine could bear, but left them devoid of joy or peace, save for that found in battle. Aengron had been subjected to the Butcher's Nails by his slave masters, and this cranial implant served as the template for his legion. However, Aengron's implants were relics of a long-lost technology, little understood even by their makers, and removing them from Aengron for close study would have proved fatal to the Primarch. Indeed, they appeared to be slowly killing the Primarch, and his mental state and self-control deteriorated, leading him to sacrifice his legion in ever more callous ways. Because of this, Early attempts to duplicate them by the combined efforts of the Legion's tech marines and apothecaries appear to have been far from successful and resulted in high rates of mortality and irrecoverable homicidal frenzy on test recruits. However, as time progressed, viable technology was replicated and steadily improved, and entire newly formed companies of recruits were implanted, as well as existing world eaters who volunteered for the dangerous operation. The majority of these were absorbed back into the Legion's line units, while those deemed perhaps too unstable for such tasks joined a growing number of near berserker assault units known as Rampager squads. And within these, those too far gone to be anything but restrained between battles simply became known as the Butchers, a frightening portent of what was to come for the Legion. Angron was easily turned to the designs of the War Master, and would be counted as one of his first and initially most loyal allies. A vision of blood, he cut a terrible path through his own legion at Istvan III. And when at last he was done, the World Eaters were dedicated utterly to the War Master's cause. Most stories told of Angron's early life cast him as being discovered at a young age upon an unknown world. Those that found him were in service to a decadent and vicious ruling elite, for whom human blood sport was the greatest art and principal entertainment. It was to these murderous games that the young Primarch was bound by the slavers and gladiatorial masters. In time, he became a killer the likes of which they had never before seen. Angron, the Lord of the Red Sands. Angron led a rebellion against his masters, the culmination of which took place as the Emperor arrived above his world. The Emperor had watched with pride as Angron had led his outmatched revolt, but chose to intervene. Upon offering Angron a place by his side, the Emperor was refused. Angron had sworn to live and die with his followers and could not tolerate a new master. The Emperor, however, would not accept this, and forcibly teleported the enraged Primarch away from the slaughter. Angron would never forgive his father, for without the Primarch's leadership, the slave uprising failed, and his compatriots were mercilessly slaughtered. When reunited with his legionaries, Angron first saw them as enemies, killing many before understanding their nature and their devotion to him. And when he finally accepted them, he promised them a crusade sated by bloodlust, and that they would eat worlds together. To his legionaries, the mutilated, bloody, reeking, wrathful figure that now stalked among them as their master swiftly became a kind of savage messiah, a greater warrior than any had known, an exemplar of a brutal ideal of honor and combat that sang to their souls. Angron became to them their first master, displacing for many the loyalty they had once only given their emperor, becoming their judge their general, and a conqueror whose banner they would follow into the depths of hell itself. The 13th Legion's Astartes, the Ultramarines. The Ultramarines stood as one of the most powerful military forces in the Imperium, with an active fighting strength in the region of 250,000 legions Astartes, a sector-spanning domain under its overlordship, and an unparalleled supply and training infrastructure that allowed it to withstand losses that might cripple other legions. It would be the legion's very strength and the power it could wield that would make it a prime target for the traitor's conspiracy and bring ruination to the 500 worlds of Ultramar. The 13th Legion drew its first initiates from areas as diverse as the sub-equatorial Megalev clans on Panpakaro, the war families of the Saragon Enclave, the proud Mid-Afric Hive oligarchy, and, most latterly, the anthropophagic tribes of the Caucasus Wastes. As varied in culture and origin as these groups were, they all had one factor in common: their violent and often bitter resistance to the later stages of unification. A resistance broken ultimately, in each case, not by negotiated surrender, but near annihilation. It was this which led to the first informal cognomen by which the 13th Legion was known by the forces alongside which it served: the Warborn. In the Legion's recruits was found a unique balance of aggression and restraint, discipline and determination, which rendered them supremely suited for joint task force operations and cross-theater warfare. The Legion also gained significant success in independent operations, where it took direct command of secondary support forces of the Imperialis Auxilia, whether the professional and elite regiments of the Solar Auxilia or the Terran regiments of the Old 100. The 13th Legion's campaigns during the Great Crusade would only further add to its growing reputation of peerless strategic ability, the Legion bringing human worlds to heel without the heavy-handed extermination favored by some of its brother legions. In fact, the warriors of the 13th avoided battles of attrition and prided themselves on achieving strategic goals with the minimum expenditure of life. And where salvageable human worlds were involved, this desire was also extended to the minimization of collateral damage. The burgeoning 13th Legion was soon considered a brotherhood of heroes of the fledgling Imperium. 13th Legion operated under a strict hierarchy where each warrior's responsibilities and duties were known at all times. Rabute Gilliman had overall command of the Legion, deciding its disposition and strategic objectives, as well as taking command of whichever fleet or war zone he was present in. Beneath the Primarch were the chapter masters, each of whom led approximately 10,000 warriors, and a contingent of Ultramar's Void Fleet. Assisting them were a cadre of senior officers and commanders, the legati. Each chapter of the Legion contained 10 companies of 1,000 legions Astartes, commanded by a captain, who was responsible for the tactical deployment, efficiency, and training of his warriors. Alongside the conventional order of battle with which the Ultramarines operated, several unique formations stood wholly apart from the traditional structure. The Evocati chapters were the training grounds of the Legion, comprising 2 double-strength chapters composed of both raw recruits from across Ultramar as well as a core of war-hardened veterans. Where other legions blooded their neophyte warriors at the forefront of their campaigns, Guilliman assigned them first to a tour of defensive operations within the borders of Ultramar, in conclusion to a rigorous training regime which favored both practical battle experience and more rigorous and more lengthy cerebral conditioning and mimetic implantation than most other legions undertook. The Ultramarines recruited constantly from their realm and beyond, and many Evocati would not be deemed worthy to become legionaries. Of these, the most promising aspirants joined the Vigil Operati, Rabute Guilliman's covert police force, who suppressed rebellion within the 500 worlds and acted as civil enforcers under the military regime to maintain political stability. A later development, but of equal importance, were the Invictari, a veteran cadre who served both as Legion elite and as a pool of warriors who, through their actions, had singled themselves out for potential future high command, not simply by bravery or skill at arms, but also for displaying a talent in governance, organization, and administration. The most famed and potent of these elite subformations were the Invictaris Suzerain, which formed the retinues of the 5 tetrarchs of Ultramar and functioned as both a military force for the defense of the fiefdom, arbiters of law for their population, and an honor guard for their commander in battle. The individual forces of the Suzerain Invictaris varied in size, with Tetrarch Amyntas maintaining a force of several thousand as feared peacekeepers in the troubled worlds around Ajax, while Tetrarch Lymiad had but 100 in his guard, partly in deference to the Mechanicum warriors who stood in Konar's defense, and needed little aid in doing so. Members of the Invictari could also be found in limited numbers spread throughout the Legion's veteran units and stratus of command. Through the Remembrancers and Iterators, the Ultramarines are portrayed as paragons of the Imperium. However, the complexities of the Legion's divisive and antagonistic relationships with many of its fellow legions, and its insularity and supercilious mien during the Great Crusade, is often forgotten or concealed. It would be this hidden history that was to bear bitter fruit on Calth and cast a shadow over Ultramar during the Horus Heresy. Unlike so many of his kin, the Primarch of the Ultramarines was born to be a king. The adopted son of Conar Gilliman, from whom he took his name, rose quickly to prominence on Macragge. A cold and forbidding planet, Macragge was nonetheless a place of wondrous natural beauty, and bred a hardy and proud people. In years to come, it would become the heart of the Ultramarines' Eastern Empire, and its people would fill the ranks of the Legion's battle companies. By the time the Emperor was reunited with Rabute Gilliman, the Primarch had already transformed the world on which he found himself, and was looking beyond the horizon to expand the reach of his armies. From Rabute's ambitions and desires, the realm of Ultramar was created. A human empire like few others in the galaxy, with hundreds of worlds experiencing an unparalleled time of peace and prosperity under his stewardship. An obsessive strategist and administrator, Rabute Gilliman possessed a powerful analytical intelligence, as well as a talent for statecraft and a macro organization of staggering potential. As swiftly as he put his plans for Ultramar into action, he embarked on the root and branch reorganization of his legion. He impressed his own values and talents upon the Space Marines under his command, espousing a dual doctrine which embraced in parallel the ancient and deterministic values of the warrior: courage, discipline, skill, and adaptability, defined as that which was practical, and on the other, planning, precedent, analysis, and assessment, defined as that which was theoretical. Both were of equal weight and value, one complementing and informing the other, blending together as the metals which made a fine blade. This became the Legion's doctrine and its creed, developed over the course of the Great Crusade, and later codified by the Lord of Macragge in his magnum opus, the Codex Astartes. The 14th Legion's Astartes, the Death Guard. The warriors of the 14th Legion were the implacable heroes of unification. They were stalwart fighters who made endurance under fire the noblest of pursuits, ever overcoming the most nightmarish foes in the most inhospitable of war zones. Their ordinal was synonymous with resilience and unshakable courage, for unflinching determination and victory by any means. They cast down alien tyrants and warlords across 1,000 worlds and more, consigning scores of bellicose xeno strains to extinction. Few legions had beginnings as glorious as the Death Guard, nor ends as tragic. From heights of splendor, the Legion and its warriors became the very thing they once fought tirelessly against: inhuman, unrecognizable, and soulless monsters of the dark, the very stuff of nightmares. The main bulk of the Gene recruits for the 14th Legion were drawn from the warlike clans of Albia, and it was the traditions of those feared warlords which shaped their character. These earliest warriors were of especially stoic temperament and showed a gene-craft aptitude for operating in the role of heavy infantry. They were experts at survival and endurance, and quickly gained a reputation as relentless and disciplined fighters. In defense, they were stubborn and indefatigable, able to stand unwaveringly against the heaviest weapons fire and hold their position to the last living body and bolt shell if needed. In attack, they systematically destroyed a given target, crashing upon an enemy, excelling in close-range firefights and bloody attrition. The Legion favored the old Albion tactic of conducting major ground attacks at fall of night, when the shift of light confounded an enemy's watch, and gathering darkness would shadow an advance across open ground, earning it the name of Dusk Raiders. Such was the Legion's reputation during the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade, that foes given the ultimatum of attack by the Dusk Raiders would often waver in their resolve, and their defenders would melt away as the coming of darkness drew near. As relentless as they were in attack, the Dusk Raiders were known to be honorable opponents as well. Such honor extended only to worthy human foes, however. To the degenerate, the mutant, and the alien, no mercy was given. And when destruction was called for, nothing would stay the Legion's hand. The Dusk Raiders fought unwaveringly in the Great Crusade for almost a century, becoming self-reliant and taking a quiet, stubborn pride in their many martial triumphs. When reunification with their Primarch finally came, it was not to be a long-hoped-for catharsis, for instead a pall fell across the Legion. Under this shadow, the Dusk Raiders were broken down, and only the Death Guard remained. The Death Guard fought tirelessly in the pursuit of the liberation of mankind, displaying a fervor the Great Crusade had never known. Mortarion carried an unshakable determination that mankind should be freed of oppression and terror, and that victory, earned without restraint, limit, or mercy, was justified. Nor did he balk in the face of horrific rates of attrition. This was Barbarus's bleak creed of war. The Legion's restless and indomitable fleet plowed the cold void from one campaign to the next, resupplying in transit, never pausing but to make war. Its warriors did not garrison nor build. They only tore down and slew, coldly, determinedly, and with the inexorable progress of a contagion or a tsunami wave, and worlds fell before them. The Death Guard cared little for heraldry, badges of honor, or emblems of rank. Instead, their armor was decorated with the damage of battle itself, marks of their endurance. As the Great Crusade wore on, the Legion's appearance became increasingly sinister, as did its reputation. Strange rituals of inhaling or imbibing toxins became commonplace. The legion's Librarius was disbanded thanks to Mortarions' hatred of witchery, powers wielded by the erstwhile masters of Barbarous. And Mortarion spoke adamantly against Legion battle psychers at Nicaea. Legion also did not balk from the use of widely hated alchem weapons and rad munitions, regularly consuming planets and phosphex fire and expunging life with viral payloads disdained by the rest of the Imperium. Soon, stockpiles of these weapons of last resort were the reserve of the 14th Legion, its cruel master dealing death and devastation to entire star systems with impunity. The Great Crusade had set out to save worlds, however, not to destroy them. And by association with these weapons, the Legion was consigned to dark corners and only the most nightmarish of campaigns. Mortarion possessed a razor-sharp intelligence and a flair for organizational simplicity and efficiency. The Death Guard fought as one body, often led from the front by their Primarch. Obedience and order was absolute and expected, and a clear and unbroken chain of command ran like blood in the Legion's veins. No formal heraldry was maintained. The only ranks outside of highly specialized roles were those of the commanders of the 7 grand companies and their subordinate captains and sergeants. When an officer died in battle, his successor stepped in his place swiftly and decisively, without need for orders. And so the Legion's chain of command was seamless, even under the heaviest losses. The Legion was fundamentally organized around infantry, with each warrior of the Legion on foot carrying the utilitarian panoply required to fight anywhere, hold any ground, and destroy any enemy with resilience and resolve. Individual Space Marines were equipped as well as possible to operate for extended periods without resupply or support if needed, carrying a combination of bolter and close combat blade, broad trench daggers, and even the slashing heavy kukra and war scythes of Barbarous. These simple but brutal and efficient weapons were the hallmark of the Legion. The Legion lacked extensive elite units, with only a few exceptions. It made heavy use of dreadnoughts and units equipped with Terminator armor. The Death Shroud were singled out by Mortarion for their skilled arms and their proven endurance. They formed Mortarion's silent bodyguard, and at least 2 of their number remained within 49 paces of their Primarch at all times. The Grave Wardens were specialized alchem destroyers who brought a lingering, ugly death wherever they walked. However, such units were seldom seen in mass in the Death Guard's battle ranks. For Mortarion believed that even a single powered armored legionary could kill a world given enough time and endurance. Barbarous, the world on which the young Mortarion fell, was sinister and lethal. Its colossal mountains perpetually shrouded in poisonous fogs that could strip flesh from bone, while the valleys far below were a realm of perpetual gloom. It was the domain of savage, alien overlords who ruled over an entrapped and preyed upon human population as cruel and terrible gods. Mortarion was captured as an infant and trained by the most terrible of these overlords to become a living weapon. Eventually, escaping his prison, Mortarion learned that he was kin not to the monstrous beings which held him captive, but to the humans they preyed upon. Swearing vengeance, he organized the feral human inhabitants of Barbarous and brought death and annihilation to the Xenos, an act he would repeat on hundreds of worlds when reunited with his legion. Mortarion was a towering and silent figure, his flesh gaunt and pale, and his black eyes hollow and haunted from the waking nightmare he had lived. He was a taciturn, remorseless lord that brooked no disagreement and sought above all justice and revenge. To the Dusk Raiders, the very graven image of Terra's Grim Reaper came before them as their new master. His words to them were simple and delivered in a harsh whisper that nevertheless carried to each and every one. You are my unbroken blades, my death guard. By your hand shall justice be delivered, and doom shall stalk 1,000 worlds. And with that, the Dusk Raiders were no more.